I'm Sarah Grace McCandless, and welcome to OnBrand, where we take a look at brands through the lens of the consumer and this desire for true connection and a two-way relationship. So we are in the holiday shopping season, and what that is going to look like in 2020, though, in terms of the retail industry, is certainly going to be quite different. We've seen shifts on this front for several years now. Things like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, those have already been reinvented and shifting and growing in different ways. But I think it's probably fair to say that what we're going to see this year is really something like we've never seen before, this impact. It's a whole new ballgame, and it goes well beyond the fourth quarter. I think we're going to see this extend for years to come. We're seeing things like new rules and restrictions when it comes to in-store experiences, but also, of course, this massive surge in e-commerce. And I think now a need more than ever for that digital experience to truly be comprehensive and best in class. That retail industry is having to reinvent rapidly, and there are some hits and misses along the way. So today we're going to dive into what's working, what's not, and where other businesses and companies can kind of learn from some of these initiatives on this front. And listen, I couldn't think of a more perfect person to bring into this conversation than my guest today, Sean Ryan. Sean is an award-winning strategist. He is a digital disruptor and journalist, and he has significant experience in the retail sector, having led social and digital strategy for Fortune 500 retailers like JCPenney and Target. Currently, Sean serves as VP of digital strategy for the Informed Engagement Network, and that's a Minneapolis-based agency. Sean, welcome to the show.
Sarah, it's great to be here. Always fun to catch up and talk all things retail and digital and branding, especially as we're moving right into the holiday season.
We certainly are. And again, you were the first person that came to mind. I knew I wanted to really hone in on this topic, particularly around this time of year. And you've been really focused on this for a while now, because in your career, so much of what you've done has really looked at enhancing the experiential with the virtual, something that I think is probably more important now than ever in light of this global pandemic. But before we get into that, I do want you to share with everyone your kind of origin story before you got into this brand and digital strategy world. I think it's really relevant to this conversation, particularly if we're talking about connection. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah. So, when I went to college at Gonzaga University, Facebook wasn't a thing until my senior year. I was going to be on ESPN. That was my plan. But I ended up in journalism. I was a TV news reporter for several years. But it was during that time, 2004, 2005, 2007, that started to see the shift into digital. News stations were starting to put their content online. E-commerce was starting to, it was continuing to grow during that time. But I made the shift from journalism, where I'm on screen doing a 1.5-minute story on a 6-hour city council meeting. And now I'm moving into this marketing communication space when I got out of the TV news business. There was a need for how brands could tell their story in this new space, this social media space, where you had just seconds of somebody's attention as they're scrolling through their news feed, and starting to reimagine how could this brand live in this space. And it was really a unique shift. A lot of people look at me like, well, how did you go from journalism to this marketing communications world? I a lot of connectivity between the two, and in fact, the agency that I work with now is almost all ex-journalists that have brought that kind of storytelling skill set to brands around the country.
Yeah, well, look, you're preaching to the choir here. I'm a writer by trade, and I think that storytelling is at the heart of, that's the kind of connective tissue with everything I do, my professional world, my creative world. I love the connection here in the segue. I think it totally makes sense. And quite frankly, I think it gave you an advantage coming into brand and strategy with that lens in terms of telling stories. So Okay, let's talk a little bit about retail. So let's get right into it. So your career includes leading strategy and teams for some really big players in the space, Target, JCPenney. Talk to me a little bit about what the lay of the land was when you really first started, focusing in on retail, and what the challenges were at that time.
Yeah. So when I spent the better part of a decade on the retail side, um, focused a lot on social media and digital content, but in particular, how those channels can interact with some of what's happening on the ground. And the holiday timeframe is probably the biggest opportunity for that. And in particular, when Black Friday. So when I started at Target and we were trying to find ways to implement more social activity with folks that were actually customers that were actually on the ground, waiting in line, creating interaction with them as they're waiting, and giving out gift cards through Twitter, and creating that fun surprise and delight in that moment, to create buzz and create interest and create this earned media and impressions for the brand in this critical time period. Through the years, from my time at Target and then into JCPenney, you saw that Black Friday creep. It was opening up at 6 in the morning, and then it was opening up at midnight on Thanksgiving night. And now we've seen it shift into Thanksgiving Day. And one retailer does it, another follows suit, and then Macy's is open an hour earlier, and so forth. To this year, where we are seeing that creep move up to now. We're seeing Black Friday deals getting launched every other week at different retailers. And we're seeing that primarily in the digital space.
For sure. Yeah. And I think that was something, that we did start to see before COVID, before this impact, before this pandemic, and maybe even more so now. I mean, I swear it was like the day after Halloween that I saw, like, it's Black Friday month now. Like, it's not like it's not just a day anymore. I mean, when we think about the in-person experience, you certainly have experience where this time of year, it was about, a lot of the focus was on more like safety around lining up or getting into the store early. I mean, we heard, there were some really negative stories on that front throughout the years, and some pushback on that. And wow, have things changed this year? The focus is safety, but it's in a completely different realm in terms of, we're under a lot of different rules and restrictions. I think, we've talked about this. I think digital is more important now than ever. What are some things that you think you've seen in your experience that maybe were predictors and ahead of the game in terms of the digital front? You mentioned social e-commerce. I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we've seen a lot of the e-com brands like the Amazons of the world that are pushing your brick and mortar retailers. And this is no, amazing insight to shift the way that they're doing business. Now you're seeing that in conjunction with the change in shopping behavior over the last decade plus, where when a lot of retailers are looking at bottom line and that Black Friday weekend, really pushing them over the edge for the year, they're looking for more of those kind of curves to push those purchases at when you're not going to get all of it on Black Friday, because customers are thinking and they're planning ahead. Holiday shopping starts for people now, and some of the last research that I've seen, primarily in September. And they know that, well, I can get it shipped to my house. So you take that with the health and safety concerns of COVID, you're seeing this big shift to how can we start to communicate with our consumers about what are going to be these big deals? How can we surprise and delight them earlier through the process, so that instead of this big curve of sales that you get on Black Friday weekend, it's a lot of leading up to that of sales bumps. And doing that through digital, doing that through utilizing a CRM tool and getting someone that email message or that surprise and delight deal that they see on Facebook, because we know so much more about the consumer. We know exactly what to get in front of them. That it's really shifting. What's that major, golden where you get into the black for a retail come this Q4.
Do you think those deals are more important now to the consumer? I mean, we're in a state where, look, a lot of people are operating under different budgets. They may have decreased work or lost their jobs. So it's going to be a different season this year. Do you think they're more important, or what else do you think is really critical now to that customer experience?
There's two things that I would say about that. One is the expectation for when those deals come has been widened. It's not just a Black Friday thing. You have an event like an Amazon Prime Days that has pushed Target, JCPenney, Kohl's into having their own version of that. And then we're seeing kind of little events like that ever since Prime Day to leading up to Black Friday that have those events that are communicated via digital channels. The other thing that I would say is that because the Facebooks and the Twitters of the world know so much more about the consumer, the expectation is that I'm going to see a deal that actually resonates with me on my feed. Having worked at JCPenney, the big thing was the catalog. It's a 500 stack book that you get in the mail. Maybe some of those things are interesting to you, but now we can deliver the 5 things that we know are going to be most relevant to you right in your news feed as you're scrolling through. And I mean, let's be honest, who looks at the mail anymore?
Right. I mean, my highlight is I still get letters from my grandmother and send them to her, which I absolutely love. I like it, but I call it real mail, right? Versus like this kind of catalog driven thing. It's so funny. I've been watching The Office a lot in quarantine. It's like my go-to, like blankie. And I just got through the season where they were like trying to land the white pages in Scranton, because like that's the big deal. It's like a book of paper, right? And I was thinking like, wow, like would Dunder Mifflin that wouldn't even be the focus anymore if they did The Office today, but I digress. Maybe it'd be a retail company. I don't know.
Right.
I think you make some really great points there too. I'd love to get just kind of pause on the topic of customer experience. And I'd love to get your take based on your career. And again, you've worked for some brands who have done some really innovative things. You've led, kind of been brought in to lead something to kind of pivot it and regrow it, right? So with that, what do you think makes a really good customer experience? And is there a layer to consider that's specific for retail?
Yeah, the expectations of the consumer have changed drastically, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that the channels of communications with brands have grown significantly. I mean, it's not just placing a phone call to the customer care center. You can email, you can, yell at them on Twitter if you want to. And, that's part of what I did when I was at Target and JCPenney, is standing up these customer care teams to be able to respond. Well, now there's the expectation a brand's going to respond. And that can have an enormous impact, and we can talk about that later too. That experience and how that can possibly impact somebody that may have had a bad experience previously with brand. But you've got brands that have offered more channels that they're going to communicate on top of the app experience or the digital experience that customers have. A Target or a Macy's or what have you, where I can take my phone out, I can look on my app, and I can see what stores actually have that product, or what is my history with this brand. What are the purchases that I've made? Where did I make them? To the point where I'm assuming that every customer service or sales associate or team member has all that information at their disposal as well. So customer autonomy that technology brings So I can go in the store and I can figure the stuff out that I typically or used to would have had to go to an associate or team member to figure that out. It only ups the game for the kind of customer experience that you need to provide for somebody walking in your door or interacting with your brand online.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a huge Target fan, and I know I look at them through the, lens of both brand and consumer. And, they were doing some things pretty early on. I remember when Cartwheel was developing, and I think you were involved in that too, kind of evolved into the app. And again, it was really one of the first places where I would be in store and be able, and I've done this recently in Target, where I see something I like and it's not in my size, and I scan the tag in the store and I'm figuring out, do I want to pick it up at another location? But and again, I think before COVID, Target was a brand that had that dialed in terms of options, delivery, things like that too. Is that, to me, that feels like something that is going to be really pivotal in terms of survival in this current state. Would you agree with that? And what are some other things that you think are must-haves moving forward?
Sure. And I mean, I think we've talked the idea that there are certainly a number of terrible negative economic impacts of COVID. There are a lot of small shops that have had to close up. And there are a lot of businesses that are larger businesses that have had to lay people off, but it is forcing brands and restaurants and all sorts of different types of retail. They're engaging with the consumer and the experience that they're providing. So when you look at a company like Target that was thinking ahead of the curve in terms of we'll put all your shopping list together and we'll bring it out to you in your car, or that partnership that they had with Shipt that happened well ahead of where everybody's on quarantine, that now has become an essential tool for a lot of consumers that they don't want to go out of the house, and it offers the opportunity for Target to continue to earn business and be and so I think the brands that have either set themselves up to be able to flip the switch on some of those customer ease of use and customer access is a huge opportunity. But also you've got companies, smaller retailers, that now have an opportunity to kind of play on the same scale. When you've got the Targets of the world that are a destination place, but then you've got the maybe more boutique shops that aren't necessarily right in the center of the shopping universe, and you might have to go a little out of the way to get there. If my shopping experience now is totally online on my computer or on my phone, that little boutique shop really doesn't have there's no difference in experience.
Yeah, good point.
Between certainly there are Target and other brands do a fantastic job of their online digital experience that is tough for a smaller shop to recreate. But just the basic, I look for the thing that I want, I find it, I make the purchase, and it can be delivered to my home. That's the same. And so there's a huge opportunity to kind of build out that very scalable digital solution for consumers.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, you're in Minneapolis, I'm in Portland. We live in two cities where that small to medium business retailer is really prominent in our regions, right? And I think you're right. I think now with technology, you can have that digital experience with your more mom and pop shops. But one thing is that we were also kind of trained into this immediacy culture, right? Especially with your Amazon Primes of the world. Do you think that's shifting in light of COVID? Do you think that maybe that's an advantage for small to medium businesses, that maybe we're a little bit more patient now? Or do you think it's the opposite?
That's a really interesting question, because I think on the one hand, I agree with that. Now that I'm thinking about it, if I need something right now, I know I can go down to the street and go to the big box retailer that's going to have it. And because I'm less likely to leave the house because I want to be healthy, I want to be safe. I'm more willing to wait a little bit. And you're right, that immediacy, while there are certainly the I don't know necessarily some of the shops are going to be able to compete with the Amazons where you get it tomorrow with Amazon Prime kind of thing, but it's not the expectation that I can run out of the house this afternoon and go pick it up today. And that's a huge paradigm shift for the consumer mindset.
Yeah, I think that's building off of something, again, that was happening well before COVID set in. And that was, we were predicting the shift in 2020, where experience is more important than price and product. So people will pay. It's not about getting the best deal anymore necessarily. In fact, they'll pay more for a better experience. And I can speak to that as a consumer as well, particularly in the retail sector. I had an experience with a kind of newer up and coming makeup line where I actually canceled my order before it shipped because I had such a bad experience after I placed the order. I was trying to give them more money to get the order to me faster. Talk about patience, because I didn't have it. And they couldn't change it. And I couldn't and they're not teeny tiny, right? So like I wouldn't like put that on again. A small business. They're pretty good. I'll leave them nameless right now. But I think that's something, to think about, that maybe that's an opportunity here, whether you're a small to medium business or you're a large conglomerate, that what hasn't changed is that experience matters, right? Let's take that. Let's go. We talked a little bit about social. I know you want to get back to that too. So you and I both come traditionally more from the quote unquote marketing world, right? I've been agency and brand side before I've been in my current role. I came in, there was a huge growing need on the customer service side. I've seen social break down these silos because you are just the brand. You are the company and you have a relationship with your customer. Sometimes there are ups and sometimes there are downs. What's your experience with this on the retail side? And where do you think social plays in terms of that connection, that engagement, and that relationship?
Yeah, I think the most important thing, and this was a hurdle for not only retailers that I worked at, but colleagues that I've worked with in similar spaces, is getting brands to not think about social as a push tool. It's so much more than that, and the ability for you to mine conversation and that audience, that consumer first. That's one of the most critical and I think underappreciated parts of what social media can be for brands. So once you've established the ability and you invest in listening to the audience, then you can start to pull on these levers like response and resolution in that space. And that's not a marketing thing. That's a customer support tool. But it also speaks to how it can't, when you look at something like social, it can't live in a silo and it can't live apart like a lot of organizations have built out their brand or their organization, where you've got the customer care function, you've got the marketing function, you've got maybe it's PR and communications function, and they're separate, and you just kind of throw stuff over the fence. Social requires a connectivity that can really enhance that customer experience, where I've got a problem with a particular product and I've posted online, and that comment not only is something that's responded to by the customer care team, but it's also picked up by the customer research and analytics and the teams are looking at what do we need to do to change some of our products, and or how do we need to shift our buying patterns. Those insights can be credible across the board. The other thing I would say is, for that person that has a bad experience and they've posted it online and you're able to resolve that for them, you've just won back a customer, because you've had that touch point where you brought them resolution. And just like a human relationship, we've talked about this, like there's ups and downs. You get in little tiffs here and there, but things can resolve and you're still friends. And that's the way a relationship with a brand works. And social plays a critical role in that.
Yeah, I of course totally agree with you. And it's also like one of the few places where like everything can happen. It's not just one point of the relationship or the journey. And I think you're right. I think people are willing to forgive. It's about how you show up when the mistake has been made. And, I know we work with teams that kind of cover the whole gamut now, and I'm really trying to design that strategy holistically versus siloed. I think that's an advantage. And again, this is one of those things I think is really pertinent in terms of takeaways and tips for people who are listening in, whether you sit in the retail industry or not. I think that's something that's really applicable across the board. I am curious, there's some recent news about partnerships, particularly with some of the brands that you've worked with. In fact, Target just announced a partnership with Ulta, which is, I'm like, oh my God, my favorite brands are getting married. This is fantastic. You've seen this before.
Yeah.
JCPenney and Sephora. So what do you think about these partnerships? What do you think that can work from them? And what are some things to maybe be cautious of?
Partnerships can be fantastic. Just from a 1 + 1 = 3 brand lift situation. You have to be smart though. You have to understand going back to being able to listen to that audience and understand what they're saying about you and what they think about you. But you can also miss the mark. I mean, I've seen retailers that try to partner with brands that are just so far off from their customer base that it ends up not creating that lift that you were looking for. You can't be a brand over here that is catering to an audience of soccer moms, and then we want to go after 60-year-old men. Like it doesn't work that way. It's not going to make sense for like a Bed Bath & Beyond to be advertising during some senior golf tour match on NBC Universal, right? You have to think about where do the brand partnerships make sense.
I think you're right. I mean, again, I saw the Target Ulta news and I was like, yay, are you registered? Probably at Target. Where can I send? I mean, it made sense because the marriage was correct and it felt authentic and not forced.
It can't be that jump, right? It has to be extensions that widen your consumer base, and say something about what your brand represents, what both brands represent, and that needs to be a good fit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that really speaks to the importance of understanding who your brand is, right? And not who you think you are. But, you talked earlier about social insights, what are your thoughts on what you can learn from what the consumer thinks about you and your brand?
Yeah, and I mean, if you're a brand starting out, that's a fun, exciting time where you set your mission, you set your purpose, and you got to commit to it, and then you got to live it. If you're an existing brand, you got to understand how you're viewed, because you can't completely flip. Now, I've been at retailers where they've tried to do drastic brand switches, and it can't happen overnight. You have to understand, how does your customer view you, so that you can start there and start to move them with you as you move your brand to maybe, and partnerships is a great way to do that. Again, it's got to be the right partnership without moving the needle too far.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have a lot of partners that are in that retail space, and some are established and some are emerging brands too. And of course, we're coming towards the end of the year. We're heading into 2021. This pandemic is still with us and will probably be for a while. So, a lot of my conversations are around considerations as we develop strategy moving into 2021. Are there areas where we need to pivot or be considerate? What are your thoughts as just to kind of close things out today on maybe some key things to keep in mind as we move into the new year?
We don't know what the first half, or much less the second half of 2021 is going to look like. But focusing on how can I create an experience for that consumer that might not be walking in my store, and really investing in that, and committing to what your brand represents there is going to pay dividends, whether COVID continues to have us quarantined in Q3, Q4 of 2021 or not. Our behavior is, as consumers, not only it continues to shift, but it's probably accelerated because of where we're at today. And so looking ahead to how can I think a little more about the experience that the consumer has, engaging online, thinking about that holistic experience and bringing that to them through the digital space is not only a COVID thing, it's a 2021 future and beyond thing.
Absolutely. And maybe that's a great note to kind of end on too. Like, you know, there's probably a reason there's this phrase silver lining, right? And sometimes you go out of crisis, you know, comes creativity, development, innovation. And I think with some of what you just spoke to will be better for businesses, again, in that retail sector, but it really extends into other industries as well. So I so appreciate your time today, Sean, your experience and background. I could talk to you all day long. And I'm sure we'll have more to talk about in the future too. Maybe we can regroup and talk about where things are 3 and 6 months from now. But thank you again for your time. And I hope you stay safe and have a great holiday season.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. Always fun to catch up with you, Sarah, and let's do it again soon.
Yes, maybe in person even.
Yeah. Oh my, what would that even be like?
Yes, maybe. Well, and I didn't even tell everybody the way that we initially met was I was intent. I'll use the word intent on meeting you at South by Southwest years ago. It was very much because of the work that you do. And I was very fortunate to grab you and be able to meet you right before you were literally getting on the road to leave. I mean, I think we had like 18 minutes.
That's right.
So, and here we are today. So I'm so grateful for that. And great to see you.
Great to see you as well.